You're kidding me.
Peace and love, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to Freedom Riders Community Wealth Building Gathering. I don't want to call it a training because we're not necessarily training. We're just coming together as a community to, help support one another, build with one another, mainly practicing community wealth building. But we've been doing a lot of things such as, um, reading, learning about financial literacy, learning the history of our country and the history of our financial system and politics and our government. That all plays together. Before I go any further, my name is Empress Shea Marie Bay. This is being recorded on YouTube, you guys. So I just wanted to thank you all for being with us today. I did put the link. If anyone watching on YouTube would like to join us live on the on Zoom. If you would like to join us live on Zoom, if you're watching this live, then you can definitely definitely click on the link and um, join us while we're live. I'm also think I want to put this on if it'll allow me. Okay, so it won't allow me to stream on duplicate services. So I'm only able to stream on YouTube right now. So I'm streaming on YouTube. Um, as you can see, we gather a few times out the week. Starting on Sundays is when we have our normal Sunday rising is when we have our normal book club reading. And we're drinking coffee together and just, enjoying the information that we're consuming through the books that we're reading. And we also get together on Tuesdays, which is today. Normally we would go over wealth building, some of the opportunities that are available, but um, I've basically what I've done is replaced one of the wealth building days to add a reading day. I think we do need to be reading more, and while our community is still building and we're still getting how can you say it, bodies in our community, we're going to be focusing more on reading. So then on Thursday, we will come together and go over some very, very strategic information that will allow you to be able to provide or create different streams of income for yourself, where you'll be able to um, replace your job if needed be. Those individuals that are, worried about losing their jobs or having to quit their jobs because they feel like their employers may force them to take the jabs or whatever. So these are definitely ways, what we discuss on Thursdays, we'll be going over some of those things, some of those opportunities, how we accumulate assets, and the various new amazing systems that are available to us to make this happen. A lot of people don't enter and understand that, jobs are not coming back and jobs will be a thing of the past. And so more so you need to start, figuring out how to create and generate income from home, from online. And so there's numerous of ways of doing that, creating in businesses, investments, and things of that nature. So that's what we focus on. And then on Wednesdays, we also get together for community meditation, where we just come together to raise the vibrations across the planet. I was just watching something earlier about that, that basically is confirming the reason why I wanted to start doing this, because I know that it'll be able to start raising the vibrations and energies will be able to start increasing all over the world as we come together every week to start raising those vibrations and tapping into our inner light and tapping into our higher self. So we read on moving forward. That is our schedule. And what I would like for us to do is go over it. There's the affirmation that one moment. There's an affirmation that I would like to share with everyone. This is what I have us to basically reciting out loud when we come together every week. So our affirmation, this is the things that we want to attract to our lives right now. We're trying to attract more abundance, more wealth, the mindset of wealth and abundance. So I'm going to share this. And then those that are on the Zoom, or if you're watching live on YouTube, feel free to join with us and recite this affirmation. So it says, I am a happy healer. True friends surround me. I have boundless energy. I have great wisdom. I am a true leader. I am filled with God-given creativity and dedicated to helping humanity. The Spirit of the Lord goes before me and makes easy and successful my way. I have faith in myself and all that I do. My creative mind comes forth with new and productive ideas. Day by day, in every way, I am getting better and better. I attract true leaders who can help achieve My mission to better serve humanity. I praise God from whom all blessings flow. I will leave the earth better place than when I found it. So mote it be. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. And I would like to also a prayer that I found I would like to share and for us to recite as well. And this is a prayer I suggest everyone maybe like screenshotting this and using this as a daily prayer. But this is for basically like protection over yourself, over your family, protection over your your possessions, your things, your home and everything like that. Just speaking it in advance, speaking it to the universe and being great, showing gratitude for it at first. These are the things that we need to be practicing more of, affirming the things that we want in our life. So this prayer or affirmation says, the overshadowing presence which guides the planet, their courses and causes the sun to shine, watches over all my possessions, my family, my home, my business, and all that is mine. The infinite spirit of the universe is my fortress and vault. All my powers and possessions are secure in the great infinite spirit of the universe. It is wonderful. Okay, so um, I hope that you guys, like those little affirmations and prayers. They are very helpful with reprogramming your mind, putting good thoughts into your mind, and affirmations, speaking out things that you want. So moving on, um, we have two people on the Zoom with us, Brother Ronsky Obey and Mother Martin. Welcome, you guys. Did you guys have any questions, anything that you wanted to say before I go ahead and dive into the book? Because we're going to try reading some more of this book today and getting finished with it. It's only a few more chapters left, actually. So, good evening to you all. All right, so if no one has anything they wanted to say, I'm going to go ahead. We left off, we ended on chapter 18, so I'm going to pick up on chapter 19. If you haven't had the chance to hear the previous recordings from the previous chapters, they are on my YouTube channel, so definitely go back and listen to those. Very, very, very great information. I'm gonna fire this AC up because I'm getting hot, y'all. So, chapter 19 of New Beginnings Study Course, Connect the Dots and See by David E. Robinson. Chapter 19 is Two Factors of Money. Money has two factors that define it: intrinsic value and a fixed quality. Everything that has these two factors is money. Everything that does not isn't. Gold and silver has always been considered money in all cultures throughout the history of mankind. These metals meet the two conditions required of money, and they're handy to use. Every element other than carbon is money. Even water is money. The reason you don't see people carrying gallons of water to store to pay for things is because water is not handy to use. Diamonds are not money, although they have intrinsic value because they vary in quality. Diamonds do not have a stable and fixed quality. Federal Reserve notes are not money because they do not have intrinsic value. They cost 2 cents to make, regardless of denominations. Okay. They cost 2 cents to make, regardless of denomination. The non-federal Federal Reserve Bank makes 98 cents profit on every dollar bill printed and a $99.98 profit on every $100 bill printed. Assuming it is government that does this, actually it's not. The Federal Reserve is more federal than Federal Express. One might wonder why the government needs money in taxes, license, and permit fees, citation fines and penalties and confiscations, and all the other subtler methods it uses to take our property from us. Federal Reserve notes are negotiable instruments that discharge debt, but they are not money. They are not backed by silver like they were in the days of the silver certificates, nor are they backed by any other commodity that meets the definition of money. The collateral for Federal Reserve notes is the future labor of the people of the United States. I'm going to repeat that again. The collateral for Federal Reserve notes is the future labor of the people and the United States as evidenced by their birth certificates. One of the key words to note is future. In other words, the collateral of labor doesn't exist now. It may exist later. So Federal Reserve notes are negotiable instruments called promises to pay or promissory notes. They are instruments of indebtedness, evidence of debt. We can no longer pay our debts because our real money has been removed from circulation. All we can do is discharge our debts. We do this with fake counterfeit money. Federal Reserve notes are counterfeit money. Many other things have been replaced by their fake counterparts in the past few years. Food, for instance, real maple syrup comes from a maple tree, but the brown sugar water, a la chemicals that you are served in the house of pancakes may look like maple syrup, but it isn't a product from a maple tree. We used to have real laws that apply to people implementing regulations rather than fake laws that apply only to corporate fictions, statutes, and codes, color of law. We used to have real titles to property rather than certificates of title, color of title, or deeds. If you really owned your land, you would not be subject to property taxes or buying or building codes. Since you only have a deed, the state owns your house and land. And if you don't pay your rent, your yearly rent, which are property taxes, the state will take your house and land away from you. There is the real and there is the artificial. There are two states of whatever state you live in. There are two states of whatever state you live in. One has hills and valleys and rocks and trees and dogs and cats and people in it. The other is a government entity, a corporate fiction. When you fill out a government form that asks, "Are you a resident of the United States of Maine?" you presume to know what the word resident and the phrase state of Maine means, but you should be certain before you sign the legal document under penalty of perjury. There are two of you in the same way. There are two of you in the same way. The real and the artificial. The real you is created by God, and if somebody pinches you, you will feel it. The artificial you was created by the state as a corporate fiction. One moment, everyone. I'm just checking something. Okay, my apologies. Okay, it says the artificial you was created by the state as a corporate fiction. Whenever you receive a letter from a creditor or a debt collector or the IRS, it is always addressed to your all capital letter trade name. That's because the letter is not addressed to you, but to your artificial straw man. On your personal checks issued to you by your bank, your straw man's name and address is imprinted in all capital letters for the same reason. If a neighbor puts a letter in your mailbox that does not have a stamp on it, he can be fined or imprisoned by trespassing on government property. In the same way, your birth certificate has your straw man's name on it. It too is government property. The state owns the birth certificate and your straw man. You may have a certified copy, but the original is the file in the Bureau of Vital Records in the state in which you were born, in the Department of Commerce, because your birth certificate is evidence of you as the collateral that is backing Federal Reserve notes. Your birth certificate is the state's certificate of title to you. Welcome, Mother Flora. Glad to have you. We're on
Greetings.
greetings, peace and love to you.
Peace and love.
We're just actually starting the reading. So I'm on the second page of chapter 19, which is 100. Well, I'm on the third page on 161.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. How did you become shadow property of the state? The Constitution supposedly forbids slavery. By trickery and deceit, the state created a corporate fiction, your straw man, with that birth certificate. And as long as you do not know the difference between your straw man and the real you, the least common denominator is your straw man. When you're driving on the street, perhaps at a higher speed than the posted speed limit, but you haven't damaged any personal property or person, a cop can stop you, hand you a bill at gunpoint, and deny your right to travel and to due process in one fell swoop. Because the cop is not dealing with you, the real life human being, but only with your artificial straw man. We were taught in public school that there are three branches of government: the executive, the judicial, and the legislative. Well, where does the DMV or the IRS fit into that equation? They don't. They're in the artificial fourth branch of government, administrative agencies. Administrative agencies would like you to think that they have legislative authority over you, which they don't. The only authority or jurisdiction they can claim to have over you is in commerce by contract over corporate fictions. The real you has God-given rights. It doesn't matter whether you live in a country with a constitution that supposedly protects those rights or not. You have God-given rights just by being you. The fake you, the corporate fiction of straw man, only has benefits and obligations under contract, and possibly diminishing civil rights, poor substitutes for real rights. Civil rights may be politically correct, but they are counter to nature and God-given rights. For instance, it may be a civil right not to be discriminated against because you have brown eyes, but the deeper, real God-given right is the right to associate with anyone you want to associate with, and to not be forced to associate with anyone you don't want to associate with. If you don't want to hire brown-eyed people just because you don't like brown-eyed people, that is your God-given right. God-given rights include the rights to livelihood, property, travel, due process, sovereignty, happiness, and health. These are not privileges provided by the state. Knowledge alone is not power. The proper use of knowledge is power. It is important to know that the difference between the real and the fake, and it is essential to know the rules by which we should live. There are constitutional experts in jail because they contracted their God-given rights away in exchange for state privileges. And it's important to be familiar with the Uniform Commercial Code, UCC, because it encompasses the real rules of planet Earth. One of the 10 basic maxims of commercial law is an unrebutted affidavit is presumed to be true. This means that whenever you get a bill, a fine, a penalty, assessment, or demand of presentment in commerce, It behooves you to respond to it timely, because if you don't, if you ignore it, you acquiesce, which means silently agree to the truth of it. You lose your due process, and the presentment may not have been true in the first place. The better way to play the commerce game is to respond timely and request that your adversary respond timely to you as well. Oftentimes, it is ridiculously easy to pull the rug out from under the IRS agent or a debt collector simply by making some righteous, formal requests they will not or cannot respond to. No law makes it mandatory for any real live human being to pay income taxes, have income taxes withheld from one's pay, or even file a tax return. How could there be? This is an obvious fact. The Supreme Court has ruled very clearly that when you file an income tax return, you are waiving your fifth yourself. No law makes it mandatory to anyone. No law makes it mandatory that anyone waives any of his rights. Hence the seldom used statement, all rights reserved. When many people get an inquiry from IRS asking them where their tax return is, they panic and ignore the inquiry. And 6 weeks later, they get an unassigned assessment that contains fines added in and penalties on the way to being levied or liened. Actually, the IRS never sends out real liens, only notices of liens, but they usually get the county recorders to treat them as a real lien anyway. When you get a letter from the IRS asking you where your tax return is, you might write back very humbly, simply and immediately, and give them power of attorney to complete your tax return for you, as long as they can sign it under penalty of perjury, and you may never hear from them again. Another way to illustrate using the maxim, which is an unrebutted affidavit is presumed to be true, is also a way to explain terminating unsecured debt. Banks do not issue loans. This is a shocker to many because we are taught to believe that if we want a loan, we go to the bank. But banks do not issue loans. Banks are prohibited from loaning their customers' assets or their own, because that would violate GAAP, which is General Accepted Accounting Principles. Banks are prohibited from loaning their own assets because that would violate Federal Reserve regulations. What is left? Nothing. Banks do not issue loans. When you leave the bank with a credit card application or any other type of so-called loan application, you are actually giving the bank your promise to pay them by your signature on your promise to pay. Your name is your bond. It could be a piece of toilet paper, no matter what. It could be on a piece of toilet paper, no matter. It is a promissory note that the bank cashes and then then gives you a deposit of equal value in return. They don't disclose that there wasn't any real loan or any real risk or collateral on their part. They simply pay a clerk $12 an hour or so to make an entry on a computer pad. This is what causes inflation. All so-called money is created out of thin air. The banks violate usury and racketeering laws every day by charging you principal and interest on the fictitious so-called loan. One way to terminate this unsecured debt without bankruptcy is when your straw man gets the bill, send in a minimum payment with a cover letter that says at the top, notice of final payment. In this brief cover letter, make a formal request in commerce that they, the so-called creditor, answer your question. Where was the risk or collateral for that so-called loan? Well, again, there was no loan, there was no risk, and there was no collateral. they can't answer that question, and you end up creating a new contract in which your straw man doesn't owe them anymore. This new contract replaces the old contract in which your straw man might have owed them thousands of dollars. This new contract is called a lawful novation. Evading responsibility is not being advocated here. If you have made a mess, it is up to you to honorably clean it up. But if the mess you've made is merely a mirage or masquerade, it is appropriate to handle it by mirage or masquerade means. Step by step, over the last few decades, the substance of our money, our laws, our rights, and our freedoms have been overlaid by something resembling but counter to these precious things. Our society has become a tyrannical police state. However, we can still be truly free because it is our birthright as human beings on earth. It just takes knowledge and action. To step out of the spell that has been cast over the common man by the conspirational powers that be. The laying of the groundwork to one's freedom and sovereignty requires dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's in at least 3 steps. Number 1, file a UCC-1 finance statement declaration to establish a public record that you are not the straw man, but are in fact the holder in due course of it. This changes the presumption of law from the public side, the state, over to the private side, your domain. Number 2, make yourself the power of attorney over your straw man. Level the field via your UCC-1 finance form. Number 3, copyright your straw man's name. This gives you a very important offensive weapon because from this point on, anyone who is coming after your straw man for anything without your permission is trespassing on your commercial property without just compensation to you. Perhaps you've heard of the term judicial immunity, that a judge has unlimited immunity, by which a clerk or a cop or an IRS agent is protected by his or her agency. It hardly exists at all. The only immunity that any agent has exists within their jurisdiction. They have no jurisdiction over you, the real live person in your domain. When you know the difference between who you are and who you've been led to believe you are, which is a corporate fiction, and when you effectively assert that difference, the scales of justice are unlocked and the balance of power reverts back to you. There is no money in circulation today, only credit. Congress borrows FRNs, Federal Reserve notes, from the non-federal Federal Reserve on the credit of the United States. Sovereigns are the source of the credit of the United States. Congress must return the credit to you when you so claim. Your name is your bond. Your name is your credit bond. So basically, guys, there's 3 steps to starting this thing. Those that are new and those that have been here, there's 3 steps to start this thing, which we basically discovered the other day on Sunday. And I shared with you all the site for Moorish American Consulate, where you go to file your declaration and judicial proclamation to basically change your name and take over the straw man. And I'm actually going to be doing some research. I want to do some research, and I'll bring this to our everyone's attention on Sunday when we get back together for reading on how to go about copywriting our trade name, which is our straw man name. Because that I don't know how to do. So we definitely want to be getting our copyright done as well. So as I begin to take these processes, you guys, and get my confidence built up in taking these different steps, I will be sharing with you the processes that I take and my results as I go. Okay. So I'm moving on to chapter 20. Mother Flora or Mother Martin, did you guys want to read a chapter or are you okay?
I don't
I'll
have
read.
the book yet.
Okay.
Mother. Yeah, I'm just, actually, I just place it on order.
Okay, no problem, Mother. Not a problem at all.
I'll read, Mother.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Chapter 20, Overcome Debt with Knowledge. The truth can set you free from your debts because there is no real money with which to pay them. A Federal Reserve note is not real money. It is legal tender which discharges debt by transferring the liability to someone else. Most debts remain unpaid until Federal Reserve notes are redeemed with substance-backed money with which to pay them. Federal Reserve notes are promissory notes of the United States that Congress promises to redeem with our credit upon demand. A bill is a demand for real money, meaning substance, silver or gold, backed currency. A bill is a demand for payment that cannot be made because there is no real money with which to pay one. Federal Reserve notes in lieu of our credit discharge debt, Federal Reserve notes in lieu of our credit discharge debt, your credit, which is your promise to pay, will extinguish debt if you accept the bill for its value with your credit sign, which is your endorsement, and return the value to the sender to settle the account. Congress borrows Federal Reserve notes from the Federal Reserve Bank with bonds that accumulate interest for the Federal Reserve System, backed by the credit that Congress borrows from the people of America, making them preferred stockholders in the corporate United States. The credit that Congress borrows from the people of America is called the credit of the United States. Congress shall have power to borrow money on the credit of the United States. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 2, U.S. Constitution 182. Congress borrows Federal Reserve notes from the Federal Reserve Bank with bonds that are backed by the credit of the people of America. Federal Reserve notes represent the United States corporation's promise to pay real money of accounts of the United States or its credit to the holders of Federal Reserve notes upon demand. Real money of account of the United States is currency backed by gold and silver coins manufactured in the United States Mint, Coinage Act of 1792. Federal Reserve notes seem always to be in short supply. The United States must borrow more Federal Reserve notes to cover the interest it must pay to the Federal Reserve Bank on the notes it borrows. Ad infinitum. There are never enough Federal Reserve notes to cover the entire debt of the nation without borrowing more Federal Reserve notes to cover the interest on the entire debt. Federal Reserve notes are debt instruments, evidence of debt that enslaved us. So why use them? The use of Federal Reserve notes is optional. Our slavery to Federal Reserve notes is a voluntary choice, whether we know it or not. In 1933, House Joint Resolution 192 made it a federal offense to refuse to accept Federal Reserve notes, promises to pay, or promissory notes to discharge, dollar for dollar, contracts demanding gold. HJR 192 of 1933 did not order people to use Federal Reserve notes to discharge debt. It simply allowed people to use Federal Reserve notes to discharge debt. People use Federal Reserve notes voluntarily, whether they know it or not. By using Federal Reserve notes, people volunteer into voluntary servitude to the Federal Reserve Bank. Since there is no real money of account of the United States, a charge, an invoice, a bill is an offer to contract to settle the debt with Federal Reserve notes or a mutual offset credit exemption exchange. The debtor has the option of discharging the debt with Federal Reserve notes and enslaving himself to the Federal Reserve Bank by thinking that the Federal Reserve notes are real money that must be used, or paying the debt with his credit, which is his mutual offset credit exemption exchange, if and when he knows that he can. Here is the remedy. Commercial redemption is based on the fact that there is no real money of account of the United States. During the previous century, our legal system was converted from common law to commercial law by the owners of the Federal Reserve Bank. They pretend that there is equal protection under the law and that involuntary servitude does not exist. But these pretenses are not true. They use legalese, which are words of art, to controvert the meaning of every legal document we sign. By using legalese, the bankers can say that they offer equal protection under the law and give full disclosure of the material facts without lying or stealing. But do they really? You and I do not know how to decipher their legalese, so we seldom read the legal documents we sign. Due to our advisors, loan officers, attorneys, moms and dads, teachers and preachers, and the overall mental conditioning of society, we believe everything we hear and see on TV. Without full disclosure of the material facts, we believe everything we are told. On May 23rd, 1933, Congressman Louise T. McFadden, Representative of Ohio, Chairman of the House Banking and Finance Committee, brought former charges against the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve Bank, the Comptroller of Currency, and the Secretary of Treasury of the United States for numerous criminal acts, including fraud, unlawful conversion of money, and treason. To protect themselves from these criminal charges, the House and the Senate, both House of Congress, passed House Joint Resolution 192 on June 5, 1933. HJR 192 of 1933 states that the people who had surrendered their gold to the federal government in obedience to President Roosevelt's unconstitutional and illegal proclamation for citizens of the United States to surrender their gold to the United States were exempt from paying their debts, since their means of paying their debts had been taken away from them and replaced with money substitutes, which equals fiat Federal Reserve notes that discharge debts instead of paying debt. Public Policy HJR 192 of 1933 provided a remedy to the victims of President Roosevelt's crime. This remedy is the basis of debt cancellation by law today. In HJR 192 of 1933, the Board of Directors of the corporate United States, meaning Congress, confirmed after the fact Roosevelt's removal of America's gold from circulation and its replacement with fictitious substitute instruments of debt. This conversion created the exemption upon which debt cancellation by law is based. The debt process assesses a UCC contract trust account that the federal government has been using in your name since you were born and without your knowledge, and consent to help pay the interest on the federal debt to the private non-Federal Reserve Bank. They made the government the beneficiary of a private constructive cestus key trust and are using your commercial energy to fund the interest on the government's ever-increasing federal debt to the private non-Federal Reserve Bank. The U.S. Treasury created a private constructive cestus. The U.S. Treasury.
I'm sorry, Mother. It's pronounced Cestq Trust.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're
The U.S. Treasury created a private constructive cestq trust through which the United States Corporation and all its subsidiary corporations, states, counties, cities, towns, school districts, fire districts, etc., interact with your fictitious mirror image straw man. Fictitious corporations cannot interact with the living flesh and blood woman or man. They can interact only with the fictitious mirror image straw man that you are presumed to accommodate by performing and co-signing agreements in his name. They have convinced you, the living flesh and blood woman or man, that they are addressing you instead of your, I can't pronounce this word, Mother, ENSLEGIS.
It
Ins-
is lingus.
Ens
Okay,
legis.
Ens legus, yeah.
thank you. Instead of your ens legis, which is government created fictitious mirror image straw man. You are presumed to be voluntarily accommodating your fictitious mirror image straw man, whether you know it or not. The debt belongs to the fictitious you, but the real you is presumed to be responsible and liable for the fictitious mirror image straw man's action and debt. Now that you are aware of this presumption, you can redeem your status from the government controlled by rebuttal and stand first in line and first in time to recover dollar for dollar. The collateral the government has been holding in your name and earning interest on since you were born. Wow. Maxim, he who has the gold pays the bills. In commercial redemption, a presentment, an invoice, a bill, is an offer to contract to discharge a debt. A bill or a debt is a liability or a negative charge, a debt to your debtor, the straw man, the debtor, but a positive charge, an asset, offer of credit to you, the secured party creditor of your straw man. It is not a demand for credit from you. Everything is reversed. A bill to your straw man is an offset of credit to you. So why not accept the credit offered to you and pay your straw man's debt with a mutual offset credit exemption exchange between you and the presenter of the offer of credit, and thereby settle and close the account. To do this, simply endorse the presentment, the invoice, the bill your straw man receives with your signature, your credit sign, and thereby acknowledge and accept the debt. Accept the debt credit for its value and return its value to the sender as a mutual offset credit exemption exchange that settles, satisfies, and closes the account. Your endorsement of the charge with your name, your signature, your number, your social security number, and transaction date, which transforms the charge into a promissory note, which extinguishes the charge with your mutual offset credit exemption exchange when you return the extinguishing credit to the sender. To confirm the dollar for dollar value of this exchange, make a postal money order payment of consideration for this contract. The claimant demand real money of account of the United States, and you offer to pay the full dollar for dollar value of the debt with your mutual offset. Credit exemption exchange. If the claimant refuses to accept your offer, his refusal puts him in dishonor and default and in contempt of Congress. His refusal to accept your legal tender offer puts him in violation of public policy HJR 192 of 1933, which requires his acceptance of a legal tender offer or he forfeits his right to his claim. The claim then rebounds upon him, the respondent, because he dishonored your offer to pay him with real money of account of the United States when such is restored. So he must discharge his claim himself. The only way to educate creditors in the commercial redemption principles is to demonstrate that their demands for real money of account of the United States must be withheld until real money of account of the United States is made available again. The creditor has the same equal opportunity as you to make the creditor has the same equal opportunity as you to wake up and stop playing the fiat money game. Accept and return. Accept the value of the charge and return the value of the charge to the sender. Extinguish. The only money you have to extinguish a debt with is your credit. The constitutional credit of the United States, your mutual offset credit exemption exchange.
Thank you, Mother, for reading. So now this is the last page here about the accept for value. I just want to say for those listening too, this book is somewhat outdated, but somewhat is not. So, and it did say that in the beginning, it did say that some of the processes, they're not like to the letter or to the T, to the official, like step by step. There are many ways to get these different processes done. So I just want to say like the where you sign your name on like your on a utility bill or something like that and say that you are accepting it for value with your signature. It's actually more to it than what they're saying here. This is probably something that they were able to do in the past. However, because more people are coming into this knowledge, they've been creating different processes and trying to make it more difficult for us to get accomplished what we've been trying to get accomplished. So don't do this. Do not do this. What we just read about. I will eventually be sharing other processes with you all. Okay, so we're going to move on to chapter 21, and I'll make this the last chapter of the day. In chapter 21 is equity interest recovery. During the financial crisis of the Great Depression of 1929 to 1933, the tangible substance of real money, which is gold and silver, was removed from the monetary system of the United States. In its place, the intangible substance of the American people, the wealth and productivity that belongs to them, was pledged by the government as collateral for the debt, credit, and currency of the United States and placed at risk so commerce could continue to function. This is well documented in the actions of President Roosevelt and Congress and in the congressional debates that preceded the execution of reorganization measures in bankruptcy. The new money, paper Federal Reserve substitutes for real money, is issued to the banks in return for government obligations, bills of exchange, drafts, notes, trade acceptance, and bankers' acceptance. The new money will be worth 100 cents on the dollar because it is backed by the credit of the nation. It will represent a mortgage on all the homes and other property of all the people in the nation. Senate document number 43, 73rd Congress, first session. The new money belongs to all the people in the nation. The national debt is defined as mortgages on the wealth and income of the people of the country. Encyclopedia Britannica, 1959. The people's wealth is their income, productivity, and private property. The bankruptcy reorganization of the United States is evidenced by 1, the Emergency Banking Act of March 9, 1933, and 2, House Joint Resolution 192 of June 5th, 1933, and 3, the series of presidential executive orders that surround them. 20 years prior to this, on December 23rd, 1913, Congress passed an act to provide for the establishment of Federal Reserve banks to furnish an elastic currency to afford a means of rediscounting commercial paper and to establish a more effective supervision of banking in the United States and other purposes, called the Federal Reserve Act. One of the other purposes of the Federal Reserve Act was to authorize the hypothecation of the obligation of the United States, which the Federal Reserve banks were authorized to hold under 12 U.S.C. 14A. Hypothecation is a pledge of property as a security or collateral for a debt without delivery of title or possession. Federal Reserve Act, Section 14A. A tacit hypothecation is a hidden lien or mortgage on property that is created by operation of law without the parties' express knowledge or agreement, creating a tacit mortgage or tacit maritime lien. A tacit hypothecation is a hidden taking of assets owned by a party other than the taker to be used as collateral for a loan without transferring the owner's title or use to the taker. If the owner of the asset that the taker takes and uses as collateral for a loan retains the possession and use of the property, but the bank, which the lender to the taker or borrower, can take and sell the property in the event that the borrower, who is the taker of the assets, default on the loan. The action is called, in words of art, a pledge of assets to the taker. If the taker of the assets pledges the assets to a bank as a collateral for a loan, the process is called, in words of art, a rehypothecation. In either a hypothecation or a rehypothecation, there is equitable risk to the actual owner of the assets. Federal Reserve notes are obligations of the United States to the American people and the Federal Reserve Bank. Federal Reserve Act, Section 16, codified at 12 U.S.C. 411. The full faith and credit of the United States is the substance taken from the American people by hypothecation. The real property, wealth, assets, and productivity of the people that has been rehypothecated to the Federal Reserve Bank by the United States for its obligation to the Federal Reserve and U.S. issuance and backing of borrowed Federal Reserve notes as legal tender for all taxes, customs, and other public dues. In other words, the hidden taking of the assets of the American people to be used in commerce by the United States while leaving the people with possession and use of those assets is called, in words of art, an hypothecation. If the taker of the asset, which is the U.S., pledges the same asset to the bank, which is the Federal Reserve Bank, as collateral for a loan, the procedure is called, in words of art, a rehypothecation. In either a hypothecation or a rehypothecation, equitable risk and interest accrues to the owner of the asset, which is the American people. Therefore, Federal Reserve notes are priority obligations of the United States of the American people and secondary obligations of the United States to the Federal Reserve Bank. The commerce and credit of the people of the United States of America continues today under the bankruptcy reorganization of the United States, as it has continued since 1933, backed by the asset and wealth of the American people at risk for the federal government's obligations, currency, and Federal Reserve notes. Under the 14th Amendment, a numerous Supreme Court precedents and in equity, the private property of the American people cannot be taken or pledged to the United States for public use and put at risk without due process of law and just compensation, remedial recovery of equity interests. The United States cannot pledge and risk the property and wealth of the people of America for any government purpose without legally providing them a remedy to recover the equity interest that is due them on their risk. Courts have long ruled that to have one's property legally held as collateral for surety for a debt, even when one still owns it and has the use of it, is to deprive the owner of his property, since it is at risk and could be lost for the debt at any time. The United States Supreme Court said that the Constitution provides that the private property shall be taken or shall not be taken for public use without just compensation. United States versus Russell, 13 Wall, 623, 627. The owners of the assets are presumed to be subrogated to the taker and therefore liable for the taker's payment on his bank loans. Subrogation is the substitution of one party for another whose debt the party pays, i.e., the sovereign is presumed to be the substituted by the government created straw man. The right of subrogation is not founded on contract. It is a creature of equity, enforced solely for the purpose of accomplishing the ends of substantial justice, and is independent of any contractual relationships between the parties. Memphis and LRR Company versus Dow, 120 U.S. 287, 302 to 302, 1887. The American people who own the assets and the originating credit are presumed to be subrogated to the corporate United States and therefore liable for Congress interest payments to the non-federal reserve, to the non-federal Federal Reserve on the lawmakers' borrowed and ever-increasing national debt. Under the law of equity, the United States of America cannot hypothecate and rehypothecate the property and wealth of its private citizens and put it at risk as collateral for its currency and credit with the Federal Reserve Bank or any other bank without legally providing them with an equitable remedy for recovery of what is due and payable to them upon demand. The United States government does not violate the law nor the Constitution by doing this in order to collateralize its financing or reorganization under bankruptcy to the Federal Reserve Bank, because the United States government does in fact provide a legal remedy for the recovery of what is due to them as accrued interest for risking their assets and wealth, so that it can legally hypothecate and rehypothecate the private wealth and assets of the people who back its obligations and currency with their substance and credit and their implied consent. The provisions for the remedy are found in Public Policy HJR 192 of 1933, aka Public Law 7310, that suspended the gold standard for U.S. currency and abrogated the right to demand payment in gold and made Federal Reserve notes legal tender for the first time, backed by the substance or credit of the nation, backed by the substance, i.e. backed by the substance and credit of the people of America. All U.S. currency since 1933 is only credit backed by the real property, wealth, assets, and future labor of the sovereign people of America, taken by presumptive pledge by the United States and repledged for a secondary obligation to the Federal Reserve Bank. The sovereign American people cannot recover what is due to them by anything drawn on Federal Reserve notes of debt without expanding their risk and obligation to themselves, because any recovery payment backed by this type of currency, negative Federal Reserve notes, would only increase the public debt that they are collateral for, which in equity would not satisfy anything, but which the remedy in equity is intended to reduce, because there is no longer actual money of substance with which to pay anybody anything. There is no actual money in circulation today by which debt owed by one party to another can actually be paid. Although declared legal tender for all debts, public and private, in the bankruptcy or reorganization, Federal Reserve notes of debt can only discharge charges of debt, whereas debt must be paid with substance, i.e., gold, silver, barter, or something of some commodity, and extinguished. For this reason, the public policy of our current monetary system, HJR 192 of 1933, uses the technical term discharge as opposed to payment in laying out public policy for the monetary system of this new world order, because a debt cannot pay a debt. A negative charge cannot neutralize a negative charge. It just increases it. Ever since 1933, commerce in the corporate United States and among its corporate entities have been conducted only with negative instruments of debt, i.e. debt note instruments by which the liability of the debt is discharged and transferred to someone else in a different form, but never extinguished until lawful. substance-backed money of accounts of the United States is restored. The unpaid debt created and expanded by the current monetary plan carries a public liability for its collection, because when debt is discharged with debt instruments in commerce or Federal Reserve notes included, the debt is expanded instead of extinguished, thus expanding the public debt, a situation eventually fatal to any economy. Congress and the government officials who devise the public laws and regulations that orchestrate the bankruptcy reorganization of the corporate United States anticipated the long-term effect of the debt-based monetary system that many in the government fear, which we face today, is servicing the interest on trillions upon trillions of dollars of U.S. negative corporate debt. So government officials made statutory provisions for remedy to provide equity, interest recovery, and satisfaction of their sureties, sovereign Americans, or which are sovereign Americans, and at the time alleviate, if not eliminate, the national debt problem as well. Since the real property, wealth, and assets of all Americans is the substance backing the obligations, currency, and credit of the United States, such credit of the United States is tacitly offered and can be used for equity interest recovery via mutual offset credit exemption exchange. The legal definitions written by Congress relating to legal tender provide for private unincorporated people to issue promissory notes for equity interest recovery on their risk by the lawful tender payment of legitimate debts in commerce as remedy due them in the financial reorganization and bankruptcy now in effect ongoing since 1933. Public Policy HJR 192 of 1933 provides for the discharge of every obligation, dollar for dollar, and to the federal United States by discharging the obligation that private unincorporated people owe against the same dollar for dollar amount of obligation that the United States owes to them, thus providing a remedy for equity interest recovery and the eventual cancellation of the corporate public debt. The public debt is that portion of the total federal debt that is held by the public. 31 U.S.C. 1230. Public Policy HJR 192 of 1933, Public Law 73 10 and 31 U.S.C. 5103 gives the secured party creditor of the United States the right to issue legal tender promissory notes upon the full faith and credit of the United States as obligations of the federal United States. For these reasons, no creditor can require tender of any specific type of currency in place of promissory notes tendered in good faith for legitimate debt. The remedy for equity interest recovery via mutual offset credit exemption exchange is codified in statutory law, even though mutual offset credit exemption exchange is virtually unknown and seldom utilized in commerce today. Okay, everyone. So that concludes chapter 21. We will probably get through the rest of this book this coming Sunday when we come back for more reading. That basically concludes our gathering for today. Did anyone have anything they wanted to say about what we read? Anyone? Okay, well, I will go ahead and end today's session. I thank you all for showing up and participating in our gathering today. I will see you all tomorrow at 6 p.m. for meditation. Make sure you come prepared to in a relaxed position and ready to just meditate. So you will need a quiet space for those that plan to attend with us tomorrow. With that being said, I want to thank you all again, and you all have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you so much. Peace and love.
Peace and love.